Have you ever looked at the skyline of a modern Western city and felt that something was fundamentally wrong? You see the shimmering glass towers, the luxury boutiques, and the endless stream of digital wealth flowing through fiber optic cables. Yet on the streets below, the infrastructure is crumbling. The cost of a simple meal is skyrocketing, and a sense of deep existential anxiety hangs in the air. We are told that we are living in the most prosperous time in human history, so why does it feel like the ground is slipping beneath our feet? Why does the most powerful civilization the world has ever known seem to be struggling to perform the most basic tasks of survival? The answer is not found in the latest political scandal or the fluctuations of the stock market. It is hidden in plain sight. We are currently in the midst of an invisible war for resources. A silent global struggle that is the real motive behind the collapse of the West. For decades, we were led to believe that wealth was a number on a screen, that as long as we controlled the banks and the software, we controlled the world. We were wrong. We are rediscovering a brutal ancient truth. You cannot eat a digital credit, and you cannot run a factory on a spreadsheet. Today, I will present 3 key theories that explain why the era of Western dominance is ending, and how the invisible battle for the physical world is being won. We will look at the transition from paper hegemony to resource realism, the strategic siege of global supply chains, and the terminal trap of energy entropy. Why is this happening now? Why did the West willingly give away its leverage? And how does this affect your ability to heat your home or feed your family? By the end of this video, you will see the world not as a collection of nations, but as a complex web of molecules and energy flows. To understand the first theory, the transition from paper hegemony to resource realism, we have to go back to a very specific moment in history. For the last 50 years, the Western world has operated on the belief that the world of ideas was superior to the world of things. We outsourced our factories, we neglected our minds, and we stopped building things with our hands. We convinced ourselves that being the manager of the world was better than being the maker. We created a system where the West provided finance and branding, while the rest provided labor, raw materials, and energy. Do you understand the arrogance of this position? It is the equivalent of a man who owns a recipe book believing he is more powerful than the man who owns the farm. For a long time, the recipe book was enough, but the paper power was always an illusion. It relied on a global peace that is now shattered. Guess what happens next? When the farmer realizes that he no longer needs the recipe book to cook his own food, the man with the paper becomes irrelevant. This is resource realism. It is the realization that in a time of conflict, a ton of steel or a barrel of oil is worth infinitely more than $1 billion in a frozen bank account. The West is currently finding itself in a position where it has all the money in the world, but nothing to buy with it. Why is this important? Because it means the fundamental unit of power has changed. We are moving from an era of financialized wealth to an era of physical sovereignty. Consider a simple analogy to understand this shift. The luxury cruiser and the fuel barge. Imagine a massive, beautiful luxury cruiser in the middle of the ocean. It has 5-star restaurants, theaters, and thousands of wealthy passengers. Nearby, there is a small, rusty, dirty fuel barge. As long as the ocean is calm, the passengers on the cruiser feel superior. But the moment a storm hits and the cruiser runs out of fuel, the power dynamic flips instantly. The captain of the fuel barge becomes the most important person in the ocean. The money on the cruiser is suddenly worthless. The art is just paper. The only thing that matters is the fuel. For the last half-century, the West has been the luxury cruiser, and the developing world, led by nations like China and Russia, has been the fuel barge. The storm has arrived, and the West is realizing that it has forgotten how to sail without the barge's help. Do you see the trap we have built for ourselves? We traded our self-sufficiency for convenience, and now the convenience has become a cage. This leads us to the second theory, the strategic siege of global supply chains. Most people think of a siege as a medieval event. But in the 21st century, a siege is invisible. It doesn't involve walls or catapults. It involves the control of strategic choke points. I am not just talking about physical paths like the Suez Canal. I am talking about the molecular choke points, the specific minerals and elements that make modern life possible. Think about your smartphone, your electric car, or the medical equipment in your local hospital. These things require rare earth elements, lithium, cobalt, and high-grade graphite. Where do these things come from? For decades, the West allowed a single player, China, to gain a near-total monopoly on the mining and processing of these resources. Why? Because it was cheaper and because it kept the pollution far away. This was the ultimate strategic blunder. We are now in a situation where the West cannot even build its own green energy transition without the permission of its primary geopolitical rival. Why is this a siege? Because the supply can be turned off at any moment. Guess what happens when the West tries to assert its political will? The resources suddenly become unavailable. This is the invisible war. It is a war fought in shipping lanes, and the West is currently losing. Let's look at a fascinating experiment in resource dependency conducted by nature. In certain ecosystems, there are keystone species. If you remove the wolves, the ecosystem falls apart because the keystone species is gone. In the modern economy, resource processing is the keystone species. You can have all the iron ore in Australia and all the lithium in South America, but if you don't have the keystone processing plants in East Asia, you have nothing but dirt. The West has effectively removed itself from the ecological chain of production. It has become a top-level predator with nothing to eat. It is because we have prioritized high-level value over base-level survival. We forgot that the pyramid of civilization is built from the bottom up. The impact of this invisible war on your daily life is profound. You see it in green inflation. We are being told to move away from fossil fuels. Every time you buy an electric vehicle or a solar panel, you are participating in a resource flow that drains capital from the West and sends it to the East. The efficiency is a digital lie. The physical reality is that resources are becoming harder to get and controlled by people who no longer wish to support the Western order. We are being forced into a new colonialism, but this time the West is the colony. We are providing the raw data while the rest provides the hard reality. Why is the West so slow to respond? Because admitting the truth would mean admitting that the last 30 years of economic theory were a failure. It is much easier for politicians to talk about values and democracy than it is to talk about the price of cobalt. But the invisible war does not care about your values. We are reaching a point where the paper tiger of the Western financial system is being shredded by the chrome claws of the physical world. The collapse we are witnessing is the sound of the luxury cruiser finally hitting the rocks. We have been so distracted by the digital screens in our pockets that we didn't notice the fuel barge has already sailed away. But the most dangerous part of this war is the third and final theory, which deals with the concept of energy entropy and the terminal trap. This is the moment where the physics of the universe meets the hubris of man. The cost of maintaining our civilization exceeds the energy we can extract. To understand where we go from here, we have to look at the reason why the Green Revolution might actually be the final move in the invisible war to dismantle the West. To understand this, we must discuss the most fundamental law of the universe, the law of thermodynamics. Specifically, we need to look at energy return on investment, or EROI. This is the ratio of how much energy you get out compared to how much energy you have to spend to get it. Think of it as the profit margin of a civilization. In the early 20th century, the West struck black gold. The EROI of early oil wells was staggering, sometimes as high as 100 to 1. This massive energy profit built the modern world. But the low-hanging fruit is gone. Today we are digging deeper, and the EROI has dropped to 15 to 1, or even lower. Do you understand the gravity of this decline? As the energy profit margin shrinks, the civilization has less extra energy to spend on things like education, art, and high-quality healthcare. We are becoming an organism that has to spend so much energy just to find its next meal that it has no energy left to think or grow. This is the energy trap. Why is the Green Revolution a tactical move? Because building a green infrastructure requires a massive upfront investment of the very fossil fuels we are trying to replace. By pushing the West to decarbonize on an aggressive timeline, the global resource realist powers are essentially tricking the West into a strategic disarmament. We are tearing down our old reliable energy houses while we are still waiting for the new ones to be built. And the materials for those new houses are held by our rivals. Why is this important? Because a civilization without reliable, cheap energy is a civilization that cannot defend its own interests. It is a civilization that is easy to manage. Think about the analogy of the self-cannibalizing engine. Imagine a ship running out of coal where the crew starts tearing down the decks to burn them. Eventually, there is nothing left to burn but the hull itself. This is what the West is doing. We are burning the structural integrity of our own economy. This isn't about saving the planet in the way it's advertised. It's about managing the energy bankruptcy of a system that grew too complex for its own good. This brings us to the sociological dimension of the collapse, the rise of the useless class. We have created an entire generation of information managers. David Graeber called these bullshit jobs. They are roles that provide no tangible benefit to the physical survival of the tribe. This is a liability during a resource war. The people who actually do the work, the truckers, the miners, the farmers, the technicians, realize that they are the ones keeping the luxury cruiser afloat, while the passengers in the upper decks are merely generating noise. This is the social rot that makes the West so vulnerable. We have lost our physical competence. We have forgotten how to be useful in the ancient biological sense of the word. Why is the digital mirage being pushed so hard? Because the physical world is becoming too expensive to offer to the masses. It is a coping mechanism. The digital world is the bread and circuses of the 21st century. As long as you are distracted by pixels, you won't notice your physical life is being restricted. The elites understand that the invisible war for resources is already lost, so they are building a virtual sanctuary to keep the population docile while the real assets are consolidated. Guess what happens next? The Great Realignment. The world will return to a series of resource blocks. This is a change in the very nature of truth. Truth is the person who can deliver the grain, the gas, and the metals. The narrative is being defeated by the reality. This is why the West feels chaotic. It is like a man trying to sue the person who is currently holding the oxygen tank he is breathing from. It is a futile, desperate act of a dying era. Why is this important? Because your survival depends on your ability to de-digitalize your life. You must move your focus from the screen to the ground. To resist, you must build your own physical moat. This means diversifying your assets into things with intrinsic value and becoming energy literate. Let's talk about the entropy of empire. Every great civilization reaches a point where its overhead costs exceed its energy intake. The Roman Empire reached it when the cost of defending its borders became more expensive than the loot it brought in from new conquests. The British Empire reached it after the World Wars. The West is reaching it now. We are like a giant oak tree that has grown so tall that its own weight is beginning to crush its roots. The collapse is a shedding of complexity. The real motive behind the collapse is the natural consequence of a civilization that forgot it was biological. We tried to transcend the physical world. The invisible war for resources is simply the mechanism by which the universe rebalances the ledger. You cannot borrow from the future forever, and you cannot replace matter with math. The transition we are entering will be defined by a return to gravity. We are falling back to Earth, and the landing will be hard for those who have spent their lives in the digital clouds. But there is a silver lining. When the mirage fades, the things that truly matter become clear again. The value of a neighbor, the importance of a skilled trade. The collapse of the West is the birth of a new, more grounded era. We are being forced to grow up and face the physical world as it really is. The West is losing that control, and with it, the master code of the last century is being deleted. But the human code, the code of survival, of adaptation, and of creativity, is still within us. I want you to look around your room and identify the things that are real, not digital images, but the things you can touch. This is your true wealth. Don't let yours be taken in exchange for a digital promise. Stay focused on the physical. Stay connected to the source. Stay vigilant. I hope this exploration of the invisible war has provided you with the clarity needed to navigate the coming storm. This is not a time for despair, but for a calculated return to reality. The West as we knew it is ending, but the world is not. There is a new map being drawn, and your place on it will be determined by your physical utility and your mental sovereignty. Thank you for your attention, for your intellectual courage, and for your commitment to understanding the forces that shape our world. My name is Jiang Xueqin, and I will see you in the next analysis.